Vivienne Okafor was 41 years old on the night her husband slid divorce papers across the head table of her retirement dinner, and she signed them without saying a word. She had spent 19 years as a senior urban planning director for the Mecklenburg County Planning Authority in Charlotte, the kind of career that left its mark on a city in ways most people could not trace back to a name. She drove a 6-year-old sedan. She brought her own lunch in a canvas bag most days and ate it at her desk while reviewing site plans. Her colleagues knew her as the one who read every document to the last paragraph and never needed to be told the same thing twice. She wore her hair in tight braids she redid herself every 6 weeks on a Sunday afternoon, and she did not own a piece of clothing she could not justify and function. Her husband, Gordon Okafor, had arranged himself at the head table between two of her senior colleagues that evening, and when the first round of toasts was done, he reached under his chair and placed a manila envelope on the white tablecloth in front of her. He had timed it so that 60 of her colleagues and mentors were present and watching. He had believed, she later understood, that the presence of witnesses would force her compliance, that she would absorb the blow quietly rather than cause a disruption on the evening of her own retirement. He was right that she absorbed it quietly. He had misunderstood what the quiet meant. She opened the envelope. She read every page. She took the pen from her coat pocket, the one with the engraved initials her father had given her at her licensing ceremony, and she signed where the tabs indicated. She slid the envelope back across the table, stood, and walked out of the banquet room without looking back. Gordon had expected shock, or tears, or a scene. He got none of those things. What he did not know, what he had never once thought to investigate in 12 years of marriage, was that Vivienne Okafor had been 3 steps ahead of this moment for longer than he had been planning it. And the private consulting practice she had registered under a name he did not recognize already held a contract worth $7 million with the very city authority she had just retired from. He had left her with nothing. He had left her with everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The evening before the retirement dinner, Vivienne was in her study going through the last of the files she was transferring from her county office: project folders, permit records, correspondence going back 11 years that she had kept and organized in the particular way of someone who understood that cities were built from accumulated decisions and that every one of them eventually mattered to someone. She filed the last folder into a labeled banker's box, pressed the lid flat, and sat back in her chair and looked at the room around her. The study was her truest room. She had built the shelving herself the year they bought the house, 6 runs of oak board, cut to fit the wall from corner to corner, sanded and oiled by hand over 3 weekends in the fall when Gordon was away at a conference. She had arranged the shelves herself, and every object on them was there by intention. Her father's city planning textbooks from the 1970s, a framed site map of the first neighborhood revitalization project she had led, a small wooden model of a mixed-use development in Noda she had shepherded through 4 years of community hearings, and in the far corner of the second shelf, her father's pen. Her father, Emeka Okafor, had spent 26 years as a city planner for the municipality of Durham, before retiring and teaching urban studies at NC State. He had died 3 years ago, in the spring, 2 weeks after attending a panel she had presented at, and telling her afterward, with the particular pride of a man who recognized a continuation of himself, that she had become something he had not managed to be. She kept his photograph on the study wall. She kept his pen in its case on the shelf. She did not take it out often, but she had taken it out that afternoon and placed it in her coat pocket for the dinner, because she had known, not in any specific or documented way, but in the way of a woman who had spent 19 years reading the early signals of complicated situations, that the evening would ask something of her. Her father had told her, when she was 23 and about to submit her first major planning proposal to a hostile city council, "Plan 3 steps ahead. Viv, the people who are only thinking about now will always be surprised by later." She had submitted that proposal, and it had passed on the 3rd hearing, and she had thought about his sentence every time she walked into a room where the outcome was not yet determined. She had met Gordon at a fundraising gala 11 years back, the kind of event she attended twice a year because her position required a civic presence she took seriously. He was an architect with his own small firm, which she had respected. A man who built things, who understood that design was the language of commitment to a place. He had been attentive and intelligent, and had listened to her talk about planning theory for 40 minutes without reaching for his phone. She had taken that as evidence of character. She had since learned that listening well was sometimes a tool rather than a quality. They had married after 2 years. They bought the house together. They had, for the first several years, been a particular kind of partnership. 2 professionals with demanding careers who organized their shared life with efficiency and mutual respect, and not quite enough curiosity about what each other actually felt. She had accepted that architecture, and had told herself it was enough. The first sign she had not examined closely enough came 14 months ago, on a Saturday morning when she had come downstairs earlier than usual and found a paper statement on the kitchen counter, face up, from a firm she recognized as a Charlotte family law practice. Gordon had not mentioned retaining a family law attorney. She had looked at it for a long moment, then set her coffee down and photographed it with her phone before he came downstairs. She had not said anything. She had carried the photograph with her like a document she did not yet know how to file. On the shelf in the study, next to her father's pen case, was a small brass key she had kept on a hook since the year they bought the house. It opened the filing cabinet in the corner, the one she used for professional records, the one Gordon had no reason to open and never had. She had moved the photograph there that afternoon. She had been collecting ever since. Plan 3 steps ahead. The people who are only thinking about now will always be surprised by later. The paper statement had been the beginning. Once she had it, she looked at everything differently, not with panic, not with urgency, but with the methodical attention she applied to a planning proposal that had inconsistencies she needed to resolve before it went to a vote. She pulled 3 months of shared financial statements and found a pattern she had been too busy to notice. Transfers to an account she did not recognize, in amounts below the threshold that would trigger an automatic alert, consistent in their timing and in their deliberateness. She added them across 12 months of records, and the total came to $38,000. She photographed every page and filed them in a folder she labeled simply with a year and a quarter. She found the communications by accident, the way the most significant things often arrived, not through a search, but through a moment of ordinary attention that caught something that should not have been visible. She was passing the open study door one evening and saw Gordon's laptop screen at an angle that showed a name she did not recognize in correspondence that carried the unmistakable rhythm of familiarity. She noted the name. Petra Langdon. She did not pause. She moved past the door and went to the kitchen and made tea, and processed what she had seen with the same deliberate care she processed everything. She waited 3 days. Then she did what a planning director did when she needed information she did not yet have. She traced the record. Petra Langdon was an associate architect at a firm 2 blocks from Gordon's. Her professional profile was publicly accessible, and her career had overlapped with Gordon's firm on at least 2 joint residential projects over the past 4 years. That was a documented professional relationship. The nature of what it had become beyond professional was not documented anywhere Vivienne could access directly, but the transferred, $38,000, and the family law attorney and the name appearing in correspondence after 9 at night told a sufficient story. She made one phone call that she did not make from her regular line. She called the attorney her colleague Deshawn had used in his divorce 3 years prior, a woman named Margaret Selby, known in Charlotte's legal community as someone who did not misread a situation and did not lose cases she chose to take. She said, "I need to know where I stand before he moves." Margaret said, "Come in Thursday." She went in Thursday. She brought the folder with every page she had copied. Margaret reviewed the documents without speaking for 11 minutes, setting each page face down in a stack as she finished, the way a woman reviewed things when she was building a picture rather than looking for a single answer. When she finished the last page, she set her pen down and looked at Vivienne across the desk. "He's been planning this for at least a year," she said. "The transfers alone constitute dissipation of marital assets under state law. Combined with what I can compel in discovery, his financial position is considerably weaker than he currently believes." "There's something else," Vivienne said. She told Margaret about the consulting practice. She had registered it 3 years ago, under the name Okafor Planning Solutions, using a business address separate from the house and a tax identification number that did not cross-reference anything in her shared financial life with Gordon. She had built it incrementally, taking on small municipal consulting engagements on evenings and weekends, reinvesting every dollar the practice generated. And the previous spring she had been awarded a 2-year subcontract with the Charlotte Development Authority, the same authority she was about to retire from as a full-time employee, to lead the planning framework for a new mixed-income corridor project. The contract value was $7 million over 24 months. Gordon had not known the practice existed. He had believed, when he retained the family law attorney 11 months ago, that he was calculating a marital estate built on 2 incomes and a house and a retirement account. He had been calculating the wrong numbers entirely. Margaret sat back in her chair. She said, "He served you those papers, expecting you to be at a significant disadvantage. He's always underestimated what I was running," Vivienne said. "I never corrected him. That changes the entire shape of the asset division." Margaret picked up her pen. "He has no claim on a separately held business entity that predates the proceedings and has maintained clean financial separation." "I know," Vivienne said. "That's why I built it the way I built it." Margaret asked 2 more questions about the business address and the tax filing history, and noted the answers in her precise, economical handwriting. Then she said, "You mentioned he may make a move publicly at your retirement dinner." "I think he will," Vivienne said. "He believes a public moment gives him the advantage. And what do you intend to do?" Vivienne thought of her father's voice. She thought of what it meant to plan 3 steps ahead. "I intend to sign," she said, "and walk out." Margaret looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "All right. We'll be ready." She met with her older cousin Adeze that Saturday at Adeze's kitchen table in Gastonia, over jollof rice that Adeze had made from scratch the way she made everything, with full attention and without shortcuts. Adeze was 58, a retired municipal court clerk who had spent 30 years watching people in formal proceedings and had developed the particular acuity of someone who could read a room and a document simultaneously and find the place where they disagreed. She listened to everything Vivienne told her without interrupting. When Vivienne finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father would say you already won. The work you did before any of this happened, the practice, the contract, the filing structure, that's the win. Everything from here is just accounting." Vivienne said, That's almost exactly what he would say. Adeze said, because I learned it from him too. He used to say that the people who only plan for the present are always surprised by the people who plan for what comes after it. She set down her fork. She said, "You planned for what comes after." He didn't. That's the whole story. In the week before the retirement dinner, Vivienne continued to perform the ordinary life with the same competence she brought to everything. She attended the pre-retirement briefing with the county HR office and completed her transition documentation. She confirmed the catering arrangements for the dinner because the county had asked her to serve as the coordinator, and she had said yes without hesitation, because she saw no reason to introduce instability into a professional commitment simply because her personal life had become complicated. She cooked dinner twice that week and ate with Gordon and answered questions about her plans for the consulting work in terms she had calibrated to be accurate without being informative. She took her father's pen from its case on the shelf the morning of the dinner and placed it in her coat pocket. She had been ready for this for a long time. Some things you prepared for by building what came after. The banquet room at the hotel in uptown Charlotte held 60 people comfortably, and on the evening of her retirement dinner, it held exactly 60. Almost all of them colleagues or mentors or people whose professional lives had intersected with hers in the way that 19 years of work in a single city produced. The room smelled of warm bread and the particular mix of perfume and aftershave that accumulated in a room where people had dressed carefully for an occasion that mattered. She sat at the head table and received the toasts and the words and the framed recognition from the county commissioner and the laughter of people who had spent years in the particular trenches of municipal planning alongside her, and she was genuinely moved by it. In the specific and private way she was moved by things. A warmth that registered in the chest and did not require demonstration. Gordon had placed himself at the table at her right. He had dressed carefully. He had smiled at the right moments during the first 40 minutes. Then the formal program ended and the room relaxed into the after-dinner conversation, and in the particular gap between the last toast and the resumption of ambient noise, Gordon reached under his chair and placed the manila envelope on the white tablecloth in front of her. She looked at it. She looked at him. His expression was composed in the way she recognized from all the years she had known him, the arrangement he used when he believed the outcome was already determined, and he was simply waiting for events to confirm it. She picked up the envelope. She opened it. She read every page of the divorce petition from the first line to the last, including the exhibit schedule and the asset inventory he had attached, which was incomplete in the way she had expected it to be. She did not rush. She did not perform distress. The table around her had gone quiet in the particular way of people who understood that something significant was happening and had not yet decided whether they were permitted to observe it. She reached into her coat pocket and took out her father's pen. She signed where the signature tabs indicated. 3 signatures, 1 initial. She placed the pen on the table. She slid the envelope back across the white cloth until it came to rest in front of Gordon's hand. She said one thing. Quietly and without heat, you should have had your attorney review the asset schedule more carefully. She stood. She straightened her jacket. She picked up her bag. She walked out. The room was silent behind her. 60 people who had spent an evening celebrating her career watched her leave with the same composure she had brought to every difficult meeting, every contested hearing, every planning decision that required holding the line while others reconsidered their positions. Not one of them was surprised. Not one of them moved to stop her. She drove home alone. She made tea. She sat in her study under the oak shelving she had built herself, and she placed her father's pen back in its case on the second shelf, and she sat with the quiet for a long time. The plan she had made 3 steps ahead was already running. 2 weeks later, Margaret Selby's conference room held 4 people. Margaret, Vivienne, Gordon, and Gordon's attorney, a man named Harold Vance, who had come to the table with a confident posture that began to adjust within the first 15 minutes of the meeting. Margaret opened the asset disclosure Vivienne had prepared. She walked through the marital estate as Gordon had characterized it: the house, the joint accounts, the retirement funds, his architectural firm's valuation. Then she placed a second document on the table: the business registration for Okafor Planning Solutions. The tax filings for the prior 3 years showing the practice's growth. The contract award letter from the Charlotte Development Authority dated the previous spring for a planning services engagement at $7 million over 24 months. Harold Vance looked at the contract letter for a long time. Margaret said, "This entity was established 3 years before the current proceedings and has operated independently of marital finances throughout. The contract award postdates the filing date of the family law retainer by 14 months, which means it was developed concurrently with Mr. Okafor's planning of this divorce without his knowledge of its existence." She paused. "It is not a marital asset. It is separate property by formation and by consistent separation of finances." Gordon said, "I didn't know about this." Margaret said, "We understand that." Harold Vance asked to take a brief recess. When the room reconvened, the conversation had a different quality. The dissipated $38,000 had been documented and disclosed. The incomplete asset schedule Gordon had attached to the divorce petition had been corrected in full. The picture that emerged from the corrected accounting was not the one Gordon had constructed when he reached under his chair at the retirement dinner. He had believed he was extracting himself from a marriage with efficiency and advantage. He had been extracting himself from a marriage in which the greater financial position belonged entirely to the person he was leaving. He said her name at one point, in the register she recognized as his last available appeal, the warmth he had used in the early years, the one she had once found disarming. She looked at him with the complete attention of a planning director who had reviewed thousands of proposals over 19 years and understood to her marrow the difference between a genuine offer and a negotiating posture she no longer needed to negotiate with. She said, "You had 12 years to understand who you were building a life with. You chose to see what was convenient." She did not raise her voice. She had never raised her voice in a professional setting in 19 years, and she did not begin now. "The settlement terms are in the document Margaret placed in front of you. I'd recommend reading them to the last paragraph." She picked up her coat and her bag. She walked out. Bitterness required ongoing emotional investment in people who no longer deserved it. She had better things to build. 13 months later, Vivienne was at the desk in her study on a Thursday morning, reviewing the draft planning framework for the Mixed Income Corridor project. 63 pages, attachment schedule included, with her marginal notes in the careful handwriting she had developed over 2 decades of annotating documents that mattered. The morning light came in low through the east window and moved across the oak shelving she had built herself, which still held everything it had always held, plus one new item: a small framed photograph from the Corridor Project's groundbreaking ceremony taken the prior month, in which she was standing with a shovel and the expression of a woman doing something she had been planning for a long time. The consulting practice had brought on 2 associates in the spring. The Corridor Project was 18 months from completion. She had submitted a proposal for a second municipal engagement the prior week and expected an answer by the end of the month. A man named Bernard, a civil engineer she had met at a professional development conference 8 months prior, had come to dinner the previous Saturday with a bottle of wine and opinions about stormwater management infrastructure that she had found genuinely interesting enough to argue with. He was methodical and direct and did not speak more than he knew, which she had decided was the rarest quality in a professional setting and the most valuable one in any other. He had asked to come back the following Saturday. She had said yes. Gordon Okafor had reduced his architectural firm to a one-person practice after a project financing arrangement fell through in the summer. A development consortium that had declined to move forward after conducting due diligence that included a review of his personal financial disclosures from the divorce proceedings. He was working from a rented office space on the east side of the city. Petra Langdon had accepted a position at a firm in Raleigh 6 months prior. Vivienne had heard this through a mutual professional contact and had noted it and moved on. She reached for her father's pen from its case on the second shelf. She uncapped it and turned back to page 1 of the 63-page framework and began at the beginning, reading every word, the way she read everything, because her father had told her that the detail you skipped was the one that required revision later, and she had not skipped one in 19 years and did not intend to begin. Outside the study window, the Charlotte skyline rose in the middle distance, a city she had helped shape in ways most people could not trace back to a name. She had spent 19 years doing that work and was not done. She had simply moved to the next phase of the plan. She had made the plan 3 steps ahead. Freedom was the real currency, and she had been quietly earning it for years. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.